Hey, church. So we just did the message on Daniel 2, where we were talking about speaking truth to power. Now, in the message, there were several things. Some of the things I'm going to highlight today that we were not able to put into the message because of just because of time's sake, and just to help keep the message directly on point. First of all, there's two key themes that we can see in Daniel chapter 2. Number one is the deliverance of God's people in a time of trial. And that's one of the things that we're going to see throughout the throughout the narrative of the first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel. And the second thing, and we can see especially in chapter 2, is a persistent hope that evil human leaders, by the power of God, can be redeemed. And this is one of the things that we have to always remember, that people can and will be changed by the power of God, through the grace of God, through the truth of Jesus Christ. So we speak boldly because that's where our courage will come from God. We speak boldly because that's what we're called to do. We are not called to sit passive. We are not called to really do nothing. We are called to be the people of God, to go out in the world to show the world God in this life, in this world. So we're going to see that the wisdom of God is going to prove so much more powerful than we can ever imagine. It's so much more powerful than the knowledge of God, than our knowledge of God. If we go with God's wisdom, that is so much more powerful than trying to go in our knowledge of God. So no matter how deep the night and frightening the circumstances, no matter how powerful and wicked the enemy might be, God's people can yet dare for hope, for their own salvation, and for the conversion of those who oppress them, because the God of heaven is ever willing and able to redeem. That is really what we're seeing, and that is one of the focuses of Lent. Is, we can look at what we're going through. We can look at our circumstances, and we can see how it seems like we might be in a pit of despair. But the truth of the matter is that God is always with us. And if we take our time to put God into the equation, meaning that we take our time and we put ourselves in a position and posture of prayer, we're going to see how God is working in and through us and in this situation. No matter how dark or hopeless the situation might be, no matter who it seems may be ruling our hearts, no matter what we may be facing, God is always there, and He is always with us to give us the strength to endure, yes, but to thrive in the situations that we have been placed in. Sometimes we have been placed there by our own doing. Sometimes we have been placed there because of other people. Now, the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had is really showing something interesting. And I love dreams in the Old Testament because they always point to something really incredible. Well, so his dream is showing that all forms of inhumanity, so all forms of evil, whether it be empires, whether it be kingdoms, they are all destined to end. And they are, and the faithful are invited to know and to act upon the means of an insight into the future of God's plan. So God gives people insight to what God's plan is. And that is something that is really important for us to know. Because when we get a vision from God, and we know for sure it's from God and not our own selfish desires, but when we get a vision from God, trust that He is going to have His plan unfold. Ultimately, it is His kingdom that will always last. It is His kingdom that will always be present. It is His kingdom that will reign. Now, the question that I got after worship was this, and it says, considering that Rome was a necessary means for spreading Christianity to Europe sometime after Jesus' death, why was it destroyed in Nebuchadnezzar's vision alongside non-Christian corrupt empires? So I'm about like Babylon, Greece, Persia. And why was it the least vulnerable metal? Now, something to remember. So remember, in the dream, there's the statue, and there's a head of gold, and then there's silver, and there's bronze, and there's the legs of iron. Well, the Rome came around at the time before Jesus, and they were ruling the land of Israel during Jesus' lifetime, and even years after Jesus' lifetime. They had become such an incredible force, and iron was such a such a fierce metal that they appeared to have all the strength. Rome was the epitome of having all of the strength. Now, why was it necessary? Why was Rome necessary for spreading Christianity? I don't think it's necessarily that they were necessary. I think that God used them because God foreknew that Rome was going to be in power. God foreknew that Rome was going to be in that situation. And God used Rome, used the emperors of Rome, used the people in Rome, used the Roman pathways and the Roman roads and travel routes and trade routes and everything in order to help spread and further advance Christianity. So Rome was necessary in the fact and in the ways that they had developed their civilization, but Rome was also just the tool that God was using. And why was it destroyed in Nebuchadnezzar's dream alongside non-Christian corrupt empires? It was destroyed because ultimately God's kingdom is going to win. God's kingdom is going to reign, and God will show that He is the one that is the true king of the world, and He will establish His kingdom. He has already done that through Jesus Christ, and we get to further advance and spread the kingdom, to spread the gospel every time we have a chance to speak with someone, speaking the truth about Jesus Christ boldly, because we have sought the wisdom and the courage of God to not only speak truth but also hear truth for ourselves. It says, why was Rome, I'm talking about iron, why was it the least vulnerable metal? So that's one of those things that God is again showing that nothing is going to stand in His way. The stone that we talked about in the sermon, the stone that we talked about in the message, is just a simple reminder that God has the ability to use a stone. God can use a pebble, God can use wind, God can use anything He wants, but He is setting His stone, He is using a stone in order to crush the kingdoms. And I love the illustration that Jesus gives where He says, on this rock, so on this stone, on this foundation, nothing can tear down the kingdom of heaven. I'm looking forward to Daniel chapter 3 coming up at the next week, and I am praying for y'all. Let me know if y'all have any questions, and I hope y'all have a great week.